I think for episode 4 we're going to jump right into the Spanish. Conquistadors. They came out of the fog like nothing we'd ever seen before. And then like ducklings around their mother, boats and men pulling, coming toward the beach. The evidence is here.
Old Bush Joe used to find stuff all the time, eh? There's a Spanish helmet in one too. Yeah. But he wouldn't tell me where it was. Oh, that's probably just.
That had lots of armor, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. See, all these caves are supposed to be First Nations burial caves. But, you know,
To say. They could have been participants, but they're not First Nations people in them.
no.
They're definitely Spanish descent. Those
Yeah,
ones.
that's what I think,
And
yeah.
there wouldn't be a cross in a
No,
First Nations
no.
Despite what the archaeology branch says, the Spanish were in Barkley Sound. They were searching for treasures and gold. And the best place to look for the gold is where it is and where it's been found before. To prove what's here, I don't think we have to go any further than these 3 books. The conquistadors finally moved on a ways, but they were still hanging around and still a lot of trouble. It got so before we went to bathe in the sulfur springs, we'd have to send 20 or 30 fighters in. Granny's story, which probably won't ever get into the history books, only survived for us to hear because other people memorized it. We had a lot of gold here, but never mentioned it, because we didn't think it was good for anything. Maybe the Cowichan thought the conquistadors, who seemed to know a lot about the metal, might know what to do with the stuff. They showed it to them. In no time at all, the Cowichan were faced with a choice of slaving in the gold mine or being dead from a Spanish sword. They cut and blasted a hole in the mountain. The first clue is the sulfur springs. A couple people tried to get away and let other tribes know what was going on. What happened was so awful. There was a girl had been living with the Seichot. She was on her way home when she noticed the big mess on the hill. She got the pullers taking her home in the dugout to pull into a small creek. She snuck close. She seen the conquistadors whipping at people and taking them up to the path to the mess. She went back and got the pullers to turn around and take her up coast fast. Everyone believed what she had to say. The whole fleet headed south. On the way down, other bands and tribes joined in. There were fast 2- and 4-puller sealing dugouts going on ahead to tell people. People joined in because they figured they'd be next. Halfway down, the sealers came racing back to say there was a conquistador boat heading up. The fleet hid itself. They hid the dugouts a morning's walk from the village. They snuck in real close and just watched. They saw the Cowichan taking up the mountain path. That night they hid themselves on either side of the path going up to the mess. I think they pulled into Bamfield, which is a day's walk down the trail to where the trail to the mine starts. I think Seichot are 38 miles up the canal. Before we get into the story about the attack, I want to show what I think is. This is the native village, this is the trail system, this is the Spanish mines, and this is the gold. The next part of the story is quite exciting. It's the beginning of the battle. The dugouts came through the fog, moving real quiet. Fighters from Tassis, Cayucot, Clayoquot, from villages that didn't even exist anymore because the epidemics killed them all. Dugouts drifted past the point and spread out in the fog, blocking the passage. Women slid over the side, their bodies thick in whale oil against the cold of the water. Every 4th woman had a stone bowl full of burning coals, with a wet cedar blanket over the top to hide the glow. The other 3 had seal bladders full of melted sea oil, or cedar pitch. They swam real quiet up alongside the big wooden ship, and they started smearing her all along above the waterline. I haven't looked yet, but I can guarantee the camp was at the red dot and the boat was in the white dot. It's clear that the dugouts came from the north and would have come around this point to attack. This is the part that really proves to me where this battle took place. The sisters made a shrill whistle sound like skitterhawks. and the army moved in from the woods, moving quickly, slipping from shadow to shadow, keeping rocks and logs between them and the ones gathered around the fire, listening to musicians play music from their home place. People from what's now Bamfield, Tofino, and Ucluelet, people of the Sachet who'd come down the canal, and people from just about everywhere around here. When the army was in place, the leader whistled and waited. And the swimmers, well, they heard the skitterhawk whistles, and they put the glowing coals into the oil and pitch on the wooden boat. And then the stuff on the boats was burning. The evidence that this battle took place in Pachena Bay is overwhelming. Clearly, the Indians from Barkley Sound attacked from the land in 3 directions. The Indians from way up north came by boat around the point. The fighters in the dugouts let loose with lances with burning tips, or seal bladders full of oil, or whaling harpoons with a burning bark lashed to them. The bladders hit the deck and spilt melted oil. The lances or harpoons would set it on fire. A couple of boys had stole some gunpowder and replaced it with sand, so the conquistadors didn't know it was missing. The Cowichan chief came out of his house with his club held up. He swung it, and it screamed for him, and then he let out the most god-awful yell, and the fight was on. It was here we go time. Some of the conquistadors tried to get to their boats under way, but it takes a long time to get them sails up. Some of the fighters stayed back with the dugouts, and were waiting just out of sight around the point. And when the yelling and fighting started, the Navy came in full speed. The fire lances did it to the sails, and then they just hitched cedar bark ropes to the big boat and steered her on the rocks, and let the sea do most of the work. The next part of the story is extremely important, as it explains the blast rock. They just leaned over and bashed the heads of the swimmers, or sent a whaling harpoon through them. They took the conquistador dead up to the mine and tossed him inside. Then they let the priests go in and pray over the dead. And while the black robes were praying, the Confederacy used conquistador powder to bring the hill down over the hole, burying the whole lot of them with the gold they wanted so much. But then they saw how raw the earth looked there, and they knew it would be easy to tell there was something there, and it wouldn't take much figuring to know what. So they got the idea to hide the evidence and suck in the other conquistador boat at the same time. They lit fire to the bush. Between the blast that sealed the mine and the smoke from the bushfire, the other Spanish boat came back in a rush. They could see the other boat bust on the rocks, and of course they wanted to help. It wasn't easy to get the last big boat because the sails were already up. They threw their bladders of oil through the holes where the oars stuck out, and let the fire arrows and lances in and started the small fires. There were so many dugouts and so many fires, and the fires were spreading, and the sails were starting to burn. The ship didn't have much room to maneuver in the bay, and the smoke from the fire was making it hard to tell what was going on. Finally, it was the same as before, the boat burning, and people trying to swim for safety. The Indians' first encounter with the Spanish tells there's 3 ships showed up, and from the looks of it they took all 3 down and made martyrs out of all of them. The history books tell us Ferdinand Magellan sailed around the world with 5 ships. Only 1 ship made it. 3 ships disappeared somewhere, and Ferdinand Magellan was killed during a battle with the First Nations in the Philippines. In the Heritage Conservation Act, Spanish historical sites are protected whether designated or not. To find these sites, we need to look where they were and where the gold is. If I say I found a lost gold mine, I'll just get called crazy again. So what I'll say is I found gold that has been lost and found many times before. I think the best story and map is the one from the Medicine Men. So friend and foe arose as one man, and drove the medicine men from the island, hounded them down the inlet, herded them through the narrows, and banished them out to sea. where they took refuge in one of the outer islands in the Gulf. Then the tribes once more fell upon each other in battle. Those of the north followed the medicine men further out to sea to make sure of their banishment.
Yeah, whichever you wish to use of the name of the Indian people, this was the place for them to do their ritual. You want to call him the shaman, you want to call him the medicine man. This is where he done what he had to in order to see the image of the miniature mountain, the gold color, which is where to pray. And the real mountain is so quite a distance from here.
This is where things will get controversial. As I mentioned, I had talked to Spencer about Willie and the Solstice Caves. He told me that the harpoon man on the bow of the boats would be the first person to greet the people from the beginning of time, because they would come by boat. I'm going to stop here and go back to the video Prove It. Crown Counsel says I have no grasp on reality, and says without any archaeological proof, express that he believes the burial caves are not native. In 1790, the Spanish and the English signed what's called the Nootka Treaty. The consensus was I found no archaeological proof, yet this button was from 1790. I found this 1790 German token in a trading post. In Sarita Bay, where I believe the Spanish port was, my friend found a coin from Francis Drake, similar to the one they found in Victoria. The powers that be said nonsense, it must have come from a coin collection. Drake drew maps of Barkley Sound and Vancouver Island. They can't deny this coin was found in the gorge in Victoria, but you can bet they'll stop at nothing to prove and say that no Europeans made it into Barkley Sound before the Nootka Treaty was signed. In my book, you'll read about how the engineers approached me when they engineered the top of this mountain to be clear-cut. This letter stopped it, but then, once they had all decided I was psychologically unfit, and everything I had found is delusional, it gave them the go-ahead just to clear-cut the top of that mountain. There needs to be a complete archaeological investigation on the west coast. I'm getting a little tired of the warnings trying to rewrite history in this area. History exists in this area, and I think it's time we look into it. The Heritage Conservation Act has some very strict guidelines. Willie told me he was laughed at. They said his stories were the drunken delusions of an old Indian.
There are some sacred places there, bathing pools. Once we get up there, I'll tell you how to go about doing it. There are 4 pools that out as the water goes down. It's a very sacred place.
The rock art is clearly here. The Solstice Caves are clearly here. The old trails to the old mines, the Spanish stuff is here. Eddie Banfield was not the only person that was murdered here. Eddie Banfield was a British officer in a British colony. He was here to keep the peace between the loggers and prospectors. He was called an Indian agent. When he was murdered in 1864, the British government sent 2 warships to arrest the people who murdered Eddie Banfield. The 2 warships steamed past Banfield and went to Sarita, where 300 warriors were waiting on the beach. These guys were no match for the 500 warriors with guns on these ships. This video is just one of many that are private on YouTube. One click and they're all public. I think it's time the government archaeology branch and the First Nations prove to me that only natives could have died in caves in Barkley Sound. Only natives used caves in Barkley Sound. For me, the final straw was the desecration of a heritage trail that's up on the mountain that Willie speaks of in the cave. When I first found this cave, it was pristine. The boy in the box was perfect. 2 months later, somebody had torched the boy in the box. threw gas on it and burned it. Now, the man with the 6 leg bones laid out to look like a one-legged man has all been disturbed and moved. In the back of the cave, the boy in the box has been completely destroyed. The evidence of the box with the skull and crossbones in it is gone. This is the type of history that's disappearing, and this is definitely a chilling story. Is it fantasy? Or is there really a boy in a box with his skull crushed open, laid out to look like a Jolly Roger, the skull and crossbones? In the 1980s, I got excited about my discoveries and went straight to the archaeology branch. Steve Aitchison told me what I found was fictitious association to what they called native rock art and wanted to end it by saying they agreed to disagree. In the 90s, they just put a contract out on me. In the 2000s, I found obvious evidence of Spanish, and this is what started the witch hunt. From my research, it looks like the Spanish lost the location of the mine and started to do their research in Cerrito Bay, where they had their port. For episode 5, we're going to get into one of the English pirates, someone who made the Spanish shake in their boots. If you haven't already watched The Girls Around the World, this is a good time to have a look at it. I made these two videos